Hello, this is Greg Allison, Green Greg's, coming to you live with a special guest tonight, Command Sergeant Michael Mabee. And it is the 30th of August, 21, time on deck, 18-1200 hours Central Daylight Time. And I've had Command Sergeant Major Michael Mabee on my channel twice before, so this is his third appearance, the third time we're graced by having him here. And this gentleman is a hero of mine. He is an awesome individual. He is doing a lion's share of work to try to ensure that we have a secure power grid here in the United States. What he is doing is amazing. He is just doing so much work. He's got a website. He is filing all kind of freedom of information requests against the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and against the National Electric Reliability Corporation, trying to point out where they're trying to sweep things under the rug and hide things about holes and problems in our power grid. And right now, one of our biggest concerns is the Chinese transformers and other Chinese components that are finding their way into our power grid. As you might know, President Trump had an executive order that forbade that, although there was a lot of stuff out there already. And it just so happens that that got rescinded. We don't know the full reason behind that, but we've got this stuff coming in. And so he's got a complaint written against the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to address this. And this is something you can do, ladies and gentlemen, because, you know, on this channel, we're always, you know, a lot of prepper channels always tell you just about the sky falling apart. Well, I'm always hunting for a pole to prop it up. And that's what we're doing here is it's standing and standing our ground and fighting the good fight to try to do what's right to save our country here. And I believe we can at least do that in some fashion. I do have hope. And guys like Michael Mabee give me a lot of hope. So for those of you that don't know, it's a proposition this channel will help you survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. And by working this, we get to accomplish all three, at least two of them. The hive might require a little bit more work, but the surviving and thriving is the gist of this video. And so if you're not subscribed to my channel, please subscribe, bang the notification bell, and click off. But when you hear about what the Chinese might be able to do to take down our grid and how the industry is complicit and not really doing what they need to do, you will realize that we are in dire threat here. You will realize that this is a grave situation. And one of the backups that you ought to consider, along with fighting to make sure that don't happen, is just in case it does happen, or the sun takes us out, or an EMP in case of war, and many other things that can take down our power grid. And by the way, the sun is kicking up active again. We got CMEs coming at us, and our shields are going down. So you better really think and consider to get you some long-term food storage, because this stuff will last you 25 years. Go to prepwithgreg.com, and you can get this. It's 2,000 calories a day, a lot more than what a lot of the other vendors give you. Now they'll give you $800 calories a day and call that a day's meal. That won't cut it, guys. 2,000 calories, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Some drinks and desserts that'll make you a winner. And it's lightweight and easy to store because it's freeze dried. Even your kids can carry this. It's stored in a nice, convenient, easy to carry bucket. This bucket's a 2-week supply. And you have a special with us. If you go to prepwithgreg.com, you get $300 off a 3-month supply, or you get 25% off from a supply for a month. So guys, that's great deals. And what you get in there, just click the big logo for My Page Supply. It takes you into the website, and I still get credit for that. And you can get all kind of prepping supplies there. Guys, they're second to none. They've got the widest variety of long-term storage freeze-dry food of anyone. And you can get gluten-free, you can get vegan, you can get meat eaters, low carb, whatever you're looking for, it's all there. So check it out. So let's get on with Mike here. Mike has spoken at my power grid defense conferences. He's been on our channel here 3 times. And Mike has a new complaint to take on with FERC. So Mike, tell us about it. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself. Oh yeah, by the way, one other thing, Mike is the humble hero. He won't take credit for being a hero. He's the guy who took a guy out. He was in the towers, the Twin Towers, when they got attacked, and he took another guy out who couldn't walk. And the guy thanked him for saving his life. And then Mike tells him, "No, you saved my life. I would still been there if I didn't take you out." So that's just the way he is. So, oh yeah, by the way, he's got a great book here, guys. The civil defense book. You need to check it out. This is what a whole community can do, a town, for civil defense to save yourself in these bad situations. So, Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about your complaint, and I'll bring it up when you're ready for me to. Just tell me.
Sure. And I think my story is probably like a lot of people here on YouTube. You know, over the years, we kind of get to the point where we don't really trust that government is necessarily going to protect us, and particularly when it comes to the threats to the electric grid. And you know, I've been through power outages like everybody else, and you know, a couple of them of interest was the Great Northeast Blackout of 2003. And I was working in Manhattan at the time that that hit. I lived on Long Island. And for those of you who recall that one, that was a blackout that was caused by a tree branch in Ohio contacting some transmission lines, and it caused a cascading blackout with 55 million people out of power, 45 million in the United States and 10 million in Canada. Caused literally by a tree branch in Ohio, causing this cascading failure. So after that, and after a couple of others, I really started to do a lot of research on, you know, why is the electric grid so unreliable? It's so fragile. And what I found was appalling. I found decades and decades of federal reports talking about the threats to the electric grid, and literally no action being taken to protect the electric grid. And so, for example, there is a report from 1981, a GAO report about the physical threat to the electric grid of, you know, physical sabotage. And if you sabotage several substations, you can cause a wide area cascading blackout. And so in 1981, 40 years ago, the Government Accountability Office put out this report. To this day, as we sit here today, August 30th, 2021, there is no requirement for physical security of the electric grid. How is this possible? How can Congress, you know, have known about these threats? And then Greg mentioned the EMP threat. We've known about that since 1963, and I can go back to 1975 and show you a federal document where we were talking about, you know, the EMP threat to the electric grid in the United States. And, you know, then fast forward, we actually had a commission, a presidentially or a congressionally appointed commission. We call it the EMP Commission because their name was so long, none of us can ever remember it, but it was the Commission to study the threat of electromagnetic pulse, et cetera, et cetera. So we call them the EMP Commission. And they came out with several reports. And these reports really painted a very, very bleak picture about what would happen to the electric grid if an enemy visited an electromagnetic pulse attack on us. And Greg also mentioned about the solar activity, about the solar flare. You know, that's something we don't even need an enemy. And, you know, we got lots of enemies. You know, there's lots of people who don't like us, you know, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, the North Koreans, to name a few. But, you know, we don't even need that because Mother Nature, with mathematical certainty, is going to throw a large coronal mass ejection our way at some point. We just don't know when. We don't know if it's going to be 6 years from now. We don't know it's going to be 10 years from now. But what we do know is that about every 100 to 150 years, the Earth gets hit with a large coronal mass ejection. The last really big one was in 1859. It was called the Carrington event. Of course, we didn't have an electric grid in 1859. What we had was telegraph wires. And this charge was so powerful that it shocked the telegraph. It transmitted itself along the telegraph wires. It shocked the operators at the telegraph stations and set some of their equipment on fire. So this is prior to the electric grid. Now, if a solar flare of that magnitude caused a geomagnetic disturbance on the Earth today, our grid is completely unprotected. And one of the major components that might be damaged are these huge extra high voltage transformers that we have in the electric grid. So let's talk about those for a minute. And maybe I should back up, Greg, and just what is the electric grid? Because we all hear that term. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, they hear the term, but, you know, maybe it just, you know, seems really complicated. So I can break this down very, very simply. The electric grid contains three parts: the generation of electricity, the transmission of electricity over long distances, and those are those big transmission wires that you see on the side of the highway as you're driving along. And then the distribution of electricity, and that's where it comes, from the street to your house or your business. So those are the three parts. Now, in all three of those parts, the backbone of it are these transformers. So when they generate electricity, they have to step up the voltage with the transformer so they can transmit it long distance. And then when it gets to the area it needs to be in, they have to step it back down with another transformer so that it'll be at the voltage that they can use to distribute to, homes and businesses. So without these transformers, our grid doesn't work. And it used to be years ago that we manufactured a lot of these in the United States, but that's basically ended. And for, well over a decade now, probably longer, we've been importing the vast majority of these transformers from other countries. So we used to import them from South Korea, Germany, Switzerland, but most recently, since about 2006, we started importing these from communist China, from the People's Republic of China. So what I found in researching this particular issue with these transformers, which are the backbone of our electric grid, we can't function without these. And Greg, remind me to talk about the 1989 Quebec outage, what can happen to these transformers if I forget. But since 2006, the United States has imported 366 of these large Chinese transformers. And 294 of these are really large. 294 of these transformers, almost 300 of them, are over 100,000 kilovolt kVA. And these transformers, there is no requirement whatsoever that anybody check these things out. We import them in, we install them on the electric grid along with other equipment. Transformers are just one component. That's the one that I've been looking at and the one that Greg will talk about, Greg and I will talk about in the complaint I recently filed. But we've also imported all kinds of other equipment for the electric grid from China. And there's no requirement that anybody look at this stuff to see if there's any type of hardware backdoor or some way that they can switch us off from Beijing. We just import the stuff and we install it. So what can possibly go wrong there? Well, number one, the People's Republic of China, we've known for over a decade, has been hacking our electric grid. And we know this from government sources, multiple government sources. The Director of National Intelligence for the last couple years has been talking about this. Department of Homeland Security is constantly issuing alerts about cyber attacks and cyber reconnaissance and cyber espionage from the People's Republic of China. So this is our government reporting for years, for at least a decade, that the People's Republic of China is hacking the US electric grid. Meanwhile, all of the companies in the electric grid are importing Chinese equipment to install on the electric grid that the Chinese are already hacking. So does anybody kind of see something goofy going on here? So why would we do such a thing? Why would we import these Chinese transformers and equipment and install them in the electric grid that the Chinese are already hacking? So there's a couple of reasons for this. And this isn't conspiracy stuff, it's all economics. Number one, the Chinese are underselling everybody else. So if you are a big federal power agency like WAPA, the Western Area Power Administration, or Bonneville, or TVA, or one of these big federal things, you've got procurement rules. You generally tend to have to go with the lowest bidder. And if the People's Republic of China is underbidding everybody else, it gets very hard to not buy that Chinese transformer. And so the Chinese, I have to say, are doing an excellent job marketing this stuff in the United States. And the electric grid, now going back to what is the electric grid, so we talked about the three different components: generation, transmission, and distribution. But who runs this thing, right? It's 3,000 different companies, 3,000 different public and private sector companies that are involved in the generation, transmission, and distribution of electric power. And so these 3,000 companies, is their priority the security of the electric grid? Well, for the publicly traded companies, if we're being honest, probably their priority is shareholder value, right? If you're a big publicly traded electric company, that's what the guy in the C-suite, in the CEO corner office is always worried about, is shareholder value. If you're a small municipal utility or a co-op, or one of these kind of ones that really doesn't make a profit, your bottom line is the bottom line is keeping the thing in the black, being able to provide the electricity to your rate holders and not spending a lot of money you don't have to because you really don't have it. So what ends up happening is security takes a back seat to economics. So we can buy cheap equipment and transformers from communist China and install it in the grid that the Chinese are already hacking. And we don't want to spend a lot of money, because if we do, let's say you're a utility and you want to do the right thing, you want to go all out, you want to have every possible cybersecurity, physical security precaution, you want it to be safe, you really want to do the right thing. Well, if nobody else is doing that, you're not being competitive. If you're spending all this money, on that, and other people aren't. So what we lack in the United States, in my estimation, after 10 years of studying this problem, is any kind of rules about, that the electric grid needs to protect itself against these known threats. Those rules just don't exist in the electric grid today, and that's got to change. And an example that I like to use is air travel. And we can also talk about food, we can talk about vehicles. So let's say you want to travel from wherever you live to the other side of the country. You go to the airport, you go through security, you go through the machines, metal detectors, whatever those machines are that scan us now, to make sure you're not bringing anything on the airplane, or anybody else is, that you're not supposed to. You get into the plane, and the pilot's up there in the cockpit with all these checklists that they have to go through, and these FAA regulations to make sure that air travel is safe. And as a result of this, our air travel in the United States is incredibly safe. There are regulations that govern it. There are whistleblower protections. If a pilot thinks that a plane is unsafe, the pilot can refuse to fly that plane. So we've actually got regulations and protections in place to make sure air travel is safe. The electric grid, there is none of that. So there's no requirement that any company necessarily, do anything to protect itself from cyber attacks, electromagnetic pulse attacks, geomagnetic disturbance, physical attacks, or supply chain cyber attacks, which is what we're talking about, like with these transformers. So we'll fast forward a little bit to what can we do about this? So, that's the situation. Our government has dropped the ball on this. So, I suppose we could sit around and we could just, yell at the government, or, grumble about the government. But as Greg said, let's not do that. Why don't we take action, which is what patriots do, to protect our country? So I filed a complaint 3 days ago, actually, right before the weekend, with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And I think Greg's going to probably pull it up on the screen.
There it is.
There we go. So
Somebody
this
in the chat room was complaining that all we do is talk and don't do anything. And I said, hang on. You do a lot.
Yep.
And this is one of them right here. This is a case, and not only is this a case of what you're doing and our community, but this is something that the individuals here and that watch this video can get involved in and use this action to help us secure our grid.
Absolutely. And this, and I need everybody's help with this. So, this isn't something that can be done without a grassroots undercurrent of public support. So let's talk a little bit about the complaint and what it is, and then we'll talk about what you can do. Everybody watching this video, what you can do to help. which won't cost you a dime. You can do this all for free. So, all right, so this is a complaint with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Now, most people have never heard of that agency. So as I said, there are no regulations about the security of the whole electric grid. The only federal agency that has any authority over any part of the electric grid is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And what they have authority over, they have limited authority over what's known as the bulk power system, which is the transmission system. So remember, you've got generation, transmission, and distribution. So the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is a small little federal agency that regulates, among other things, the transmission system. Now, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission doesn't have direct authority to tell the transmission system what to do. They have to go through a nonprofit organization called the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, and we'll talk about that in a second. So if you scroll down a little bit, Greg, what I did, so I filed a complaint, and what my complaint says is, if you look at that 1, 2, and 3 right there, that entities in the U.S. bulk power system, that's the transmission system, as well as the overall U.S. electric grid, are buying critical equipment from the People's Republic of China to install into our critical electric infrastructure that the communist regime's state-sponsored and state-supported hackers are already probing and attacking. Pretty basic. That is what the complaint is about. And then 2 and 3 is that there's no requirement that anybody check this Chinese equipment when we import it in. All of these 366 Chinese transformers that we know about and all this other equipment, there's no requirement that anybody check that stuff to see if there's hardware backdoors.
So let me elaborate on this a little bit. So there's a couple of things that you worry about. Hardware backdoors can be something that's easy to hack and get into, but there's something more to it than this. There have been found components that actually have cell phone circuitry in them that can actually call out what's going on in their system and maybe even give access back in, either through the software from the back doors or through the cell phone, that they could possibly disrupt what this equipment is doing. And so they could spy on it, know what it's doing, and then possibly disrupt it, which Absolutely. In case of these big transformers means they could fry them out. For those that don't know and understand, these transformers can be 200 to 400 tons, as big as a house. And it takes 18 months to get them on the loading dock once you order them on average. And then you got to install it. And for those that don't understand, if you have enough of these go down, it's deemed that there's 9 critical substations in the United States. If their transformers went down, that the EMP Commission, the Congressional EMP Commission, reported that 9 out of 10 people in this country would no longer be with us due to societal collapse that would ensue after this. Mm-hmm. We're not just talking, you may have a solar array at your house, guys, and you maybe have a little power of your own, but what happens is entire society unravels. And so you better be 100% self-sufficient. And then you better hope that starving hordes out of the city don't come knocking on and busting down your doors. But hey, it's not just those. Most farmers don't even grow food for themselves anymore. Mm-hmm. And so it may be your neighbor that you're going to have to worry the most about, and probably your friends and family who are going to be starving to death. So, the food's only going to last so long, and that's when people are going to start looking like pork chops to some folks. It's going to be a grave situation after a year with no power, because we're talking 18 months, but by the time they can get around to replacing these things, there might not be anybody to replace them. In fact, how are you going to order these things without the grid? Because all our requisition system uses power. All the systems that move and transport them use electric power to pump the fuel, to run the trucks and the trains and these Snapple cars that they use to move them. They're just a handful of them in the country. So It takes forever. We're talking about possibly 10 years to get the entire power grid put up if the infrastructure was working to do it in. But the infrastructure isn't going to be working. I would submit that it don't come back. That once this goes down, if it goes down big, if it goes down hard, if we take out enough systems, that it don't come back. Now, if it's just a few, maybe we can bring it back, but it's going to be catastrophic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a key point. So there are 16 critical infrastructures in the United States. And what the critical infrastructures are our life, we cannot live without food, water, communications, transportation, the medical system, the emergency services. Everything depends on the electric grid. All 16 critical infrastructures depend on the electric grid. And when you look at power outages, you see a microcosm of that. So in the Texas blackout in February, which we'll talk about a little later, we saw the impacts on other critical infrastructures as a result of that. So like Greg said, if enough of these transformers go down, that we have a large scale blackout, people will die by the tens of thousands or by the millions. And, by, some estimates, 90% of the US population could die in a 1-year protracted nationwide blackout. And that came from the EMP Commission. And even if you're thinking to yourself, well, that's crazy, that could never happen. Okay, what if it's only half of that? Is that acceptable? What if it's only a third of that? There's no acceptable number of American citizens dying because of something that could have been prevented, by protecting the electric grid. And the other point that Greg just raised, which is a very good point, is, we've all heard about a lot of the recent cyber attacks being like data breaches, they hacked Target and they got all of the credit card info, or they, did a ransomware and locked up, a computer system and somebody had to pay 3 Bitcoin to get their system back. But what Greg was just talking about was that a cyber attack can destroy equipment. It can turn off equipment or it can actually destroy it. So in 2015, the Russians did a cyber attack against the Ukraine and shut off their electric grid through a cyber attack. And Secretary of Energy Granholm just said in June of this year that our adversaries have the capability of turning off our electric grid through a cyber attack. Secretary of Energy just said that this year. But I'm going back to Stuxnet, which some of you might have heard of. I know Greg has, but largely, I think a lot of people didn't really pay attention to that. But Stuxnet's really scary. So that was an attack on the Iranians' nuclear program. And we deny having anything to do with it, but it's largely thought to have been, the United States and Israel that did it. But, that's never been admitted by anybody. But what Stuxnet did is it caused the Iranian centrifuges to destroy themselves in their nuclear system. And without the centrifuges, it basically set their whole program back for years. So a cyber attack can not only get information or steal information, it can also destroy equipment, actually physically destroy equipment. And there's a vulnerability in the electric grid known as Aurora, the Aurora vulnerability, which has been known for years, but it could destroy equipment in the electric grid. And, yet again, nothing's been done about that. So, it's time for us to fight back, and it's time for us to make sure that this issue gets the attention it needs. So now, if you scroll a little bit farther, Greg, some of this is just, like the legal mumbo jumbo, request for investigation. So what's going to happen with this complaint is there's going to be a notice in the Federal Register within the next week or so. And then there's going to be about a 30-day period where people can file comments in the docket, in the docket, and then, FERC will take all those comments and make a decision. So the next part of the complaint, I outline the Chinese cyber threat, over, the last decade. So it starts out with a 2009 article from the Wall Street Journal about the Chinese in the electric grid. Then 2019, Daniel Coates was our director of national intelligence. And actually, even in the 2021 National Intelligence Report, they're still saying the same thing. But I went back, the first one I could find was in 2003. I saw that Congress was concerned in 2003 about coordinated cyber reconnaissance and probing of the US electric utilities from China. and that was in a congressional hearing. I don't know how many of you guys sit around reading congressional hearings. I don't golf or anything. I sit around and read congressional hearings. So that was one that I found. So the first part of the complaint, I documented the threat of the communist Chinese to the electric grid. And then I started to talk about the transformers. So in 2019, E&E News reported that, and this was from the Department of Energy, that we've got 200 Chinese transformers in the US energy sector. Now, fast forward a little later, this is when I really got interested in this issue, was in May of 2020, the Wall Street Journal reported that the federal government seized one of these transformers, one of these Chinese transformers, when it came into the port of Houston. And it was supposed to be going up to WAPA, the Western Area Power Authority, which actually powers Denver. It was going to be going to the Alt substation up in Colorado and was going to be one of the substations funneling power into Denver. The government seized it and took it to Sandia National Laboratories. Now, the government would not comment on that story and has been mum ever since. However, last month, the former director of intelligence programs for the National Security Council in the previous administration confirmed that they found hardware in that transformer that somebody from China can switch it off. So now you would think, okay, so if they found this vulnerability, they're going to do something about it, right? Wrong. Scroll down a little more, Greg. And this is what's going on right now. So now they found this vulnerability, but we are continuing to import these large transformers. So by the US International Trade Commission data, actually in 2020, last year, we imported 66 of them. And if, going all the way back to 2006, we've been importing these in. So we know that this is a supply chain cybersecurity problem. We know that there are vulnerabilities. We know this is bad, and yet there is not one rule saying anybody's got to check this stuff. If you're a utility company, you can just order yourselves a JSHP transformer from China, and you can just truck it over to your substation, install it in.
Hey, Mike.
Yep.
It's worth saying that a lot of the laws require a company, a public company like the utilities company, to use the cheapest hardware available. And that drives them to buying Chinese hardware off the bat. It's the law. They have to do it the way it's currently written.
Yeah, especially for federal and municipal government entities, that is generally true, that they have procurement rules that they have to follow. And so they have to go through a bidding process. And the Chinese have been doing a great job underbidding a lot of other vendors, from what I would deem safer countries like Germany and South Korea. And so that's a big problem. The security of where this equipment's coming from isn't as much of a factor as the cost. And I think that, economics definitely comes into play on that. So that's a very, very good point. Now, out of these, the next table down shows you the really big ones. So the 366 are all over 10,000 kVA. These are the ones over 100,000 kVA. So these are the ones that really would be in the bulk power system and the transmission system. And there's been 294 of those, almost 300 of these. And this is just up through 2020. I won't be able to get the 2021 data until probably the beginning of next year. I've been tracking this now for a while. But here's what I do know. If scroll down, you can go past those DOE charts. They're not really that exciting. The only reason I included them is just that they're official government charts. But go down to that first screenshot right there. So in August of 2021, this month, one of the biggest Chinese transformer companies announced that they had been awarded a contract for a 610 MVA step-down power transformer by a US company, a main US city. Now, the other thing you'll notice from their ad here is that they claim this JSHP transformer, and this is the majority of the ones I've been looking at, but there are other transformer companies as well. But JSHP claims that their transformers provide 10% of New York City's power and 20% of Las Vegas's power. So that's how critical this issue is. And it's still going on. In 2021, they're still ordering these transformers, even though we seized that transformer in 2019 and found something in it, and yet no rules have come out, that you can't buy this stuff, or if you buy it, you got to check it.
One other thing, a lot of people don't realize, the power grid is an amazing machine. It's the most complex machine ever built by mankind, because it actually instantaneously delivers the power being consumed. The power being consumed and power being generated instantaneously match each other at all times. There's no storage in the system. And so it takes a very sophisticated system to manage that. However, the downside of that is if you start losing a large number of key critical components, the whole system goes unstable, and it tries to switch things from other components, which means that, like, say, X number of transformers get shut down. Well, the system tries to switch to other transformers that load, which can cause them to physically get burnt out. And it is that burnout which makes them irreplaceable. Well, it means you got to replace them, and which could be 18 months. We're not talking the transformers on the pole outside your house, or the ones in the yard, the big boxes in some places where you got underground power like I've got here in my area. We're talking these huge municipal substation, giant long distance transformer, transfer power, the bulk power that Command Sergeant Major Michael here Mabee is talking about. So these are huge facilities, huge items of equipment, and these are the ones that are made, had been made by South Korea and Germany, that now has been built a lot by China. We need more domestic manufacturing. Now, there is some South Korean companies now manufacturing in Montgomery, Alabama, and a few other places. Some of that stepped up a little bit, but we're still way behind. And this is just at the production capability to meet the grid components as is. We don't have a production capability really set up. If we start losing major parts of that to go in to fix things. And of course, like I said, once the grid breaks down and everything unravels, your infrastructure for really being able to do that may be non-existent, which means you may not come back. Okay.
Now, and another thing that I want to talk about really quickly here, because there may be people who just really aren't that familiar with China. They know it's a U.S. adversary, and it's a communist country, but there are all these Chinese companies. So well, what's the big deal if we buy it from China versus we buy it from somewhere else? So scroll down a little, Greg, and let's talk about the government's reach in this. Let's go down a little more. So these are some other transformers from 20 and 2021. And I've got attached to this complaint as exhibits, which you can look at your leisure if you're really interested, a partial listing I put together of Chinese transformers in the US electric grid. Yeah, this is the part we want here, Greg, is the direct line to the Chinese government. So, so behind a lot of these, you can see it on your screen. I'm not going to say anything other than the facts I've uncovered. But there is a Chinese company which actually is registered in California. It's a U.S. corporation registered in California, but it has a direct line to the government of the People's Republic of China. And I just want to kind of show you what that looks like really quick, because these transformers that are coming into the United States, the Chinese government has a hand in this. And if the Chinese government is hacking our electric grid, then why would we trust them to supply us with equipment for the grid they're already hacking? So what I found through looking at a couple of contracts, and one of them was a WAPA contract, and one of them was a contract for the city of Anaheim, California, I found that this US corporation, JSP Transformer US is what it's called. It was registered in California in 2008, and it sells transformers from, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name, but JSP Transformer Company Ltd, which is a company located in the People's Republic of China. So now I've been able to determine that the JSHP Transformer USA Corporation, it's either a subsidiary, a close affiliate, and certainly it is an agent. I actually have in my hands a letter of agency from this. So there's certainly an agent of this Chinese company. Now, the CEO and the general manager of this import company and the US branch of JSHP Transformers is one and the same guy. The offices are in the same place in California. The US office of JSHP Transformer, which is the US corporation, and the importer, office in the same place, same guy running both of them. So now this import company that is importing a great deal of these transformers, by their count, over 100 into the US. They are owned by a company called XJ Group. If you see down at that bottom of the bullet, at the bottom of the screen there, they identify themselves as an XJ Group company. Well, who's XJ Group? So scroll down a little more, Greg. And I got the names of all the Chinese companies that they scroll down to the top of the next page. So this is how we roll this thing up. So XJ Group and the China State Grid signed a cooperation agreement, blah, 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 where China State Grid will acquire 100% shares of the XJ Group and will become the sole owner of the XJ Group. Okay, well, who's the China State Grid? And first of all, XJ Group now on their website, the Chinese website, they state they're directly subordinate to SGCC, which is the State Grid Corporation of China. The State Grid Corporation of China is a state-owned corporation owned by the government of the People's Republic of China. And the individual who runs the US operations of this also is a director of China EPRI, the China Electric Power Research Institute, which is also a part of the State Grid Corporation of China, which is owned by the government of the People's Republic of China. So thus we've got a clear connection between the importer, XJ Group, the State Grid Corporation of China, to the government of the People's Republic of China. Now, okay, well, what's the big deal? Well, all Chinese companies have an obligation to assist the communist Chinese intelligence apparatus. This is Chinese law. There are two Chinese laws involved in this. There's the 214 counter-espionage law and 2017 Chinese national intelligence law. All Chinese companies are obligated to assist the communist Chinese government in their intelligence operations. And they also have to maintain secrets. So if they're asked to do this, they can't tell anybody. You know, the Chinese government can come in and say, give me all the data you have on these Americans, and they have to do it. So, and then you scroll down a little farther, the bottom line here is we've got companies with a clear tie and a clear obligation to the People's Republic of China that we are buying this equipment from. But it gets worse. The Chinese are also selling monitoring equipment for these transformers and for the substations, and they're working with the United States electric grid. And I want you to think about how ridiculous this statement is that I'm about to make. Just scroll down a little bit after figure 9, Greg, because I've got, okay, it's summarized right there. An entity owned or controlled by the People's Republic of China, which is hacking the US energy sector, is also helping our electric grid to comply with NERC SIPs, which are critical infrastructure protection standards for the transmission system. So that's really nice of the Chinese. They're hacking our electric grid, and they're also helping us to protect it. What can possibly go wrong here? So this situation is so completely insane that this has been allowed to go on, but it has. Here we are today in 2021. We're installing this Chinese equipment from these companies that have an obligation to assist the Communist Chinese intelligence apparatus and the government of the People's Republic of China. And there's absolutely no requirements whatsoever that anybody check this equipment to see if it's safe. So basically, after kind of summing that all up, this is what I'm asking the federal government to do. You can scroll down a little bit more, Greg. And all of this is all up on my website. So, take a look at your leisure. Don't believe me. Don't believe Greg. Look for yourself. And, I've got all of the evidence and all of the documentation right on here. So, the conclusion is not only are we importing, Chinese equipment and systems into the electric grid that the Chinese are already hacking, but then there's no requirements that any of this stuff be checked. So what I'm asking the federal government to do, and then if you just scroll down a little more, Greg, there's the end of the complaint is the relief sought. So this is what I'm asking the government to do. I'm saying that they should direct the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, and this is the nonprofit regulator for the transmission system, to conduct a comprehensive survey of all their registered entities in the bulk power system to find out what Chinese equipment systems are currently in use in the system. That sounds like that would be a basic thing they should already know, but I can tell you for a fact that in 2019, Senator Angus King asked the CEO of the North American Electric Reliability Corporation in a congressional hearing, and it's up on my website, if he knew if any of our companies in the electric grid had Chinese or Russian equipment installed, and he could not answer the question. This was 2019, okay? And as of today, I see no evidence that anybody has gotten on the ball with this threat yet. So what I'm also asking that the federal government do is direct the North American Electric Reliability Corporation to write a standard for checking this equipment. Now, let me back up a little bit. You might be saying, well, what? That sounds pretty complicated. So in the regulatory system as it works right now, the US government can't tell the electric grid or any part of the electric grid to do anything. The federal government does not have the authority to do that. What the federal government can do is it can direct the nonprofit regulator to write a standard. So that's what they have the authority to do. So what I'm asking them to do is what's within their authority. What I'm hoping is going to happen is, in addition to what I'm asking for, is I'm hoping somebody in Congress with a level head is going to look at this and say, wait a minute, you got to be kidding me. This is going on. And we end up getting some hearings and throw some sunlight on this. So I'm asking that they direct the nonprofit regulator to write a standard, and also that they work with the 50 state public utility commissions to try to strengthen the rest of the electric grid, the generation and the distribution part, which the federal government has no authority over. So every state has its own public utility commission that regulates the distribution system in that state, and in some cases, some of the generation facilities. So part of the problem with fixing the electric grid is the mind-numbing complexity of the regulatory structure. There are over 60 different regulators involved. You've got 50 different state public utility commissions. You've got these nonprofit regulators like NERC and its regional entities. And then you've got the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the Department of Energy, which have very, very limited authority to order anybody to do anything. So really what needs to be fixed is the regulatory system ultimately, but only Congress can do that. What FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, can do is what I'm asking them to do. They have the authority to do these three things. So that's what I'm asking. And hopefully we will be able to also get Congress interested. So what can you do at home? If you're watching this and your head's about to explode because you're like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Greg, are you able to throw up the Take Action page either on the Secure the Grid Coalition or up on my webpage? Either one. They're both.
Got your web page open. I'll go
Okay,
there.
yep.
Let me stop this share.
Okay.
Hello. And I'll go back to.
We'll talk a little bit about what people can do on this, and then yeah, love to answer any questions people have, and then we'll talk about the Texas blackout, and we'll talk about all kinds of other blackouts and what we learned. We got a big one going on right now in southern Louisiana.
Yeah, they're out of power in New Orleans. Hang on a minute, but I just knocked that out. Let's see here.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still on share there.
Yeah, but this is really important. So I did a lot of research to put this complaint out. Right now, it's buried in a federal docket. Okay, so and this is part of the problem. Is like I said, this is so, the regulatory regime is so complex. So right up towards the top, if you scroll up, Greg, there's a Take Action button right in that black bar. Yep.
All right, here's what you can do, guys. Take action. Bang.
Yep. You go up to my website or the securethegrid.com, either one. There's a Take Action button on either of them. Real cool Uncle Sam graphic there. Because this is your patriotic duty to protect your country and your family. And so it's not, even if you've given up on the country, and I know, maybe some people have, don't give up on your family. This is protecting your family by taking action as well, because your family cannot live without electricity. So what I need everybody to do who's watching this is, whoever you are in whatever state you're in, you have 2 senators and you have a representative. And I need you to either send them this article, this complaint, and ask them the question, why are we importing critical equipment and systems from the People's Republic of China and installing it on the US electric grid, which the Chinese are already hacking? Very simple statement. It's a very, a question we shouldn't be having to ask. The federal government should not have allowed this to happen, but they did. The state governments should not have allowed this to happen, but they did. And what we need to do is we need to hold our elected officials accountable. We need to contact them. You're their constituent, whether you like them or not, whether you voted for them or not, that doesn't matter. They represent you, and you need to hold them accountable one way or another. So you call them up, or you write to them, you send them a copy of this complaint, and you ask them this question: why are we importing critical equipment and systems from the People's Republic of China and installing it on the US electric grid, which the Chinese are already hacking? And be insistent. Tell them you need them to hold hearings. You need them to look at this issue because your family depends on it. And you need to get all your friends who aren't watching this video to watch this video and do the same thing. If enough people start contacting the representatives and their senators, that's when action happens. That's when things happen. And I will give you a great example of this. So a lot of people might be thinking, oh, well, they're not going to do anything. They don't care about us. Well, some of them actually do. So I've had an experience with both a state and a federal legislator that actually met with me, listened to my issue, which was grid security, of course. What else would it possibly be? So grid security, and both of those legislators took action to protect me and my family and the country. They earned my vote because they did that. Other legislators I've tried to contact never returned my call, never addressed my issues. Those people did not earn my vote. That's the power that we have, is holding our representatives accountable and getting with your friends and your family to do the same thing. If our government is not protecting us, we need to hold them accountable. And if there's somebody who represents you right now who's not protecting your family, I would suggest you remember that in the voting booth. But this is how we hold our government accountable. But I cannot do this alone. Greg can't do it alone. We do everything we can, but we need everybody who's watching this to take action and contact your representatives. This is probably one of the most important things you can do to protect your country and protect your family. No, there's other things you can do too. So do that at a minimum. But if you actually are really annoyed and you want to do more, you can also contact your state public utility commission and ask them the same question. And we've got information on how to contact them up on the Take Action page as well. You can do as much as you want. The minimum I need you to do to protect your family and your country is contact your 1 federal representative and your 2 state senators. And if you do that, then bless you. You have contributed to our national defense, and you've done your job. If you can do more, if you're able to, then make a nuisance of yourself. Contact your state representatives, contact your state public utility commission, contact your governor's office. Just go wild with this complaint, because this is ridiculous. This shouldn't be going on in America, but it is. So we need some irritated people out there to hold the government accountable. That's exactly what we need.
So yeah, this don't take but a few minutes. And a lot of people don't have faith and confidence that their voice will matter. Well, let me tell you something. I ran the National Space Society's policy committee for 10 years. And I had groups of people that would run into Congress, and we had congressional visits. We also would write and make phone calls and stuff like that. But I have been quoted by Senator Vitter when he was grilling the head of NASA at the time. I have been actually, when Senator Nelson, who's the current NASA administrator, when he was senator, I went into his office, the proposal when they were fighting over what to do between what was SLS and commercial, became SLS and commercial sectors. And I had a compromise that managed to preserve both the commercial and the government programs. And I handed it to his staffer, Paul Damphus, Colonel Paul Damphus, and he grabbed it. And he said, "I like this. I'm taking it to the senator." And that's exactly what Senator Nelson pushed forward. And we've also managed to make key differences in the space station, the space shuttle, and things like that over the many years that we had been involved in that kind of stuff. So that was my background before, was a lot of the space committees that I've seen. And one thing we did is we managed to keep the United States from ratifying the Outer Space Treaty, what we call the Moon Treaty, not the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, the 1972 Moon Treaty. Just as Nell Fife Society, we just had 5,000 members. We're a small organization at the time, and we pulled off a major coup in international politics. So it is possible.
Absolutely.
And that was for those of you that think the globalists have the total upper hand, that was, we turned that around. So absolutely, you can have an impact. And by the way, I've chaired 2 power grid defense conferences. And as I said, Mike Mabee spoke at one of those. Mike and I both participate in other committees and organizations that are pushing to get the grid secure. And we put our own money where our mouth is. And we lost a fortune on that last that last power grid conference. But we're giving it our best, guys. We're trying to make a difference here. Then we do this because we believe in it, because we know our nation needs this, because we're trying to make this a better country. And that the result of it is, if we succeed, you continue to live a prosperous life, hopefully. At least if you don't, it won't be because of the power grid going down. It might be something else, but it won't be, the power grid, though, is the linchpin of all those 16 critical subsystems that Mike mentioned that we have in this country that we need to maintain our life. Because communications, well, they need power. Banking, finance, well, it needs power. Agriculture, well, to pump the fuel and to run the tractors, well, you got to have power just to pump the fuel. You've got to have power for everything. It is the linchpin. It is the Achilles heel of America, and really the entire Western world is our power grid. And so what we're doing here in the United States should be applicable to other countries too. Everyone needs to take this to heart. And this is one thing that we need to do. Other things that Mike and I push for is actually hardening the transformers themselves against the shock of an EMP or against the CME. And one thing, even doing that, actually helps against the hacking case too, because hackers will really try to, like we did with the Stuxnet virus, trying to get systems to destroy themselves by overloading them. It helps to keep these systems from being overloaded. So it actually helps against hacking attacks. So there are several things interrelated that we've studied. And for those that don't know, one of the commenters says, well, you don't know that. I'm an electrical engineer, by the way, guys. I am an electrical engineer. So my degree is in. And I work system safety, which means I look at how things can fail and what can work. And I've been doing this for a long time on avionics. And right now I'm working system safety on the avionics of the space launch system. So, you know, these are things we do to make sure that things are safe. So I understand these practices. I understand avionics and electrical systems and Mike here has been a real hero in digging out information and finding out what's going on in NERC and FERC with his Freedom of Information request. And this complaint will be a major step toward ensuring that we have a safer grid. So if y'all can take just a few minutes, it won't take you but a few to make these phone calls, it can greatly help enhance our future to make us a safer, secure, more secure country. And let me show you another thing, just in case y'all know, I'm also started this Freedom Restoration Foundation. And, you know, we're fighting for freedoms overall. And we have an action center here too. And it goes into great detail of just how to write your congressman, how to call them. And it gives you all kind of contact information. Now we got several alerts in here and I need to update this with add some alerts to it for the things that this organization talks about. But, you know, this is some of the basics you can take to heart for how to go about contacting your representatives at state and federal level. But you do need to check out your Public Services Commission for power, guys. Calling, writing, what to write, what to say on the telephone. And then here's just a resource recap of these websites. So you can see that, you know, the what we push for may be a little different than, you know, just the power grid, but it's interrelated. You can use these kind of resources to make the political contacts. That's what I was going to show. But really, for what Mike is asking for, that you want to know right now, everything you need to know to do that is right here, right there. That's everything you need to do this first contact. And then after that, if you can and would, you can step down here and get involved with your Public Services Commission. Now, again, the website here, and I will put this website in the show notes and in the pinned notes, michaelmabee.info. Take, you know, is his website, and then just click the take action. And it's Michael Mabee, it's spelled M-A-B-E-E. michaelmabee.info. So this is a great resource, guys. This whole website, look, he has got so much information in this website on his news category and other places, his library. He's got extensive resources in here so that you can see what's going on with the power grid, the information you need to know about it. This is an excellent, and there's one of our friends, Tommy Waller, who heads the Secure the Grid Foundation that we talked about. Secure the Grid Coalition, that's another organization that Mike and I both participate in. It has a weekly teleconference. And so there's excellent resources here, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. So I highly encourage you to come in here and check all this stuff out and help Mike make this happen.
One of the things that you might find interesting that I track, Greg, if you go up to the library, go to the OE 417. So the Grid Security Library, there's one that says OE 417.
So what do I do? Go.
Yeah, there. Yeah, right over to the right. Just go down. Yeah, go to that one really quick because I'll show you what this is. So whenever there's a blackout, which is known as a grid disturbance, the companies are supposed to file a report with the Department of Energy about the grid disturbance called an OE 417. And then, Greg, if you click on that graphic up there that says click for a larger view, I want to show you what I found. So I've been tracking, was that the right? No.
That's the wrong one.
Oh, yeah, no, click on that actual graphic. Go down.
On this page?
I'll
go back.
No, go back. Yeah. I'm not sure.
The graphic.
Okay, yeah, that one. Yeah, that's the one. Let's take a look at that baby, because this is what has actually caused blackouts since between 2010 and 2020. So as you might suspect, weather has been 53% of the blackouts, 1,048. Cyber attack 42, which actually, I was talking to some people from DHS at a talk that I did for InfraGard about 2 years back, and they said they were shocked that it was that low. And then there was somebody from an electric utility company that says, well, we only report the big ones. So I think that cyber attack number is vastly underreported here. But be that as it may, the other one that surprised me the first time I analyzed this data was the physical attacks. There have been 763 physical attacks against the electric grid since 2010. Now, this can go anywhere from vandalism up to well-planned, coordinated, sophisticated attacks like what happened in Metcalfe, California in 2013, where you had multiple assailants cut the alarm wires and then with precisely aimed rifle fire, take out the entire substation. They knew exactly what they were doing. And about 2 minutes before the cops showed up, they disappeared into the night. And to this day, no arrests have been made. Nobody knows who did this. And, when you look at that attack at Metcalfe, it looks like a dry run for a terrorist attack. It really does. Very, very sophisticated, multiple assailants. And that's not the only crazy attack against the electric grid. So we're not talking about, just like, minor damage from a couple kids plinking with the 22. A transformer outside of Nogales, which is on the border of the US and Mexico, somebody planted an IED and attempted to do damage with an IED. We've had up in Quebec, somebody took out the Quebec electric grid by air in a plane, a pilot, and they caught him, and he's in jail. But these physical attacks really are what keep me up at night, because when you go down the street and you see these substations and there's nothing guarding it but a chain link fence and crossed fingers, that is our electric grid, my friends. It is completely vulnerable to a physical attack. And so, that's really scary. And I've been fighting for physical security protections as well. Another one up there, so fuel supply deficiency. Well, I completely stay out of the politics of all of this stuff. But the fact of the matter is, we've been retiring a lot of coal plants and nuclear plants over the years, and what's replaced them have been natural gas plants. Now, natural gas plants generally don't have a fuel on site. It comes in through a pipeline, and fuel supply deficiency can occur with, for some reason, you don't have coal, or you don't have natural gas, or you don't have whatever it is that fuels that generation plant. That's a fuel supply deficiency. Well, when you look, there's some areas of the country that are really, really dependent on those natural gas pipelines. And we all heard about the Colonial Pipeline hack that took place recently, that cyber attack, which came out of Russia. If somebody did something, whether it was a physical attack on the fuel pipelines, cyber attack, whatever it is, and all of a sudden our electric power plants can't get fuel, that can cause a major, major catastrophic blackout if something like that happens. And then there's lots of other reasons. The ones that are in yellow are ones where there wasn't enough information and I couldn't determine what the cause was. So between 2010 and 2020, there were 2,533 total reports. I could only determine the cause in 1,971 of them. So there were 562 reports where the data is just so bad. And that's another thing I've been fighting, is that they've got to get better data. If the data is this bad that the public gets, to be quite honest with you, I doubt the government's data is any better. And one thing I can tell you in looking at this, I was talking earlier about the Great Northeast Blackout of 2003. So there's a requirement that companies report these blackouts and report these incidents. There's also a requirement that they update those reports as more information becomes available. That is not being done. In the Great Northeast Blackout of 2003, we know that 55 million people went without power. That's not what the OE 417s say. A large majority of them say unknown. So from 2003 to 2021, you don't know how many people were out of power yet. You haven't figured that out yet. No, they're not updating this data. So if the public data is this bad, and this public data comes directly from the Department of Energy, I really have very little confidence that the government has any better data about this, because they just have not prioritized this. And, therefore it makes it very difficult, to see what is really going on. In those 562 incidents, I don't know what caused these things. And I want to know, because, I'm trying to analyze what is threatening the electric grid so that I can take action, to do things to try to protect it, and then get all of you good people who are watching right now help me in these. But that's some of the info that you can find on my website is, what the threats have been, what has actually caused blackouts, and also there's a government documents library that goes, I've got documents all the way back to 1962 about threats to the electric grid that are all up there and available for you to do your own research. So like I said, a lot of people, you don't want to believe everything you hear. That's great. You don't necessarily have to believe me. Research it yourself. And all of these government documents are available for you to look at, so you can see precisely how little the government has done over the last several decades to address all of these critical threats to the electric grid. And to this day, this hasn't been done. And one question, Greg, that I'm always asked is, well, why don't they do anything about that? And maybe if you can go back to my homepage for 1 second, I'll show you exactly what the problem is. So let's go up to the home page. Yep, home. And let's scroll down to that charts with the money. So why?
Oh yeah, this is
So why I talked about this, and this talks all about the regulatory complexity that I was talking about. Okay, right here. Here we go. Scroll up just a little bit, because the headline of this section is pretty critical. No, scroll up or up. Yeah, that way. Who pays for the lobbyists who fight against electric grid security? My friends, that is you. When you pay your electric bill every month, you are paying for an army of attorneys and lobbyists that the electric utility industry has sent to Washington to prevent grid security regulation. Most industries, by their very nature, don't like regulation. I get it. I understand that. There's a balance between too much regulation and too little regulation. I get it. And we're always trying to strike that balance in the United States, it being a democracy. But the electric utility industry, which has been regulating itself for years, has actually co-opted the federal government. So, this is in 2020. I haven't put up the 2021 numbers because 2021 is not done yet. The electric utility industry, and this is just in the federal U.S. Congress, spent $108 million in lobbying, just the federal Congress alone. This is not what they've spent in the states. They've spent even more in the states, lobbying the state legislators. They've made total contributions of $28 million, and most of those contributions have gone to key members of political committees that actually have oversight over the critical infrastructures. Surprise, surprise, surprise. So members of the House, largely the House Energy Committee, have gotten over $11 million in political contributions in 2020, and members of the Senate, largely the Senate Energy Committee, have gotten over $5 million in political contributions from the electric utility industry. So when a piece of legislation comes up that maybe Greg and I think would be great because this will protect the electric grid, the lobbyists go to work. And guess what? When they're making these big political contributions and they're doing all of this lobbying, it becomes very, very difficult for senators and representatives to support legislation that their benefactors don't want them to support. This, again, people, is why we have got to pay attention and hold our representatives and senators accountable. So this is going on in Washington right now, all of this money to keep regulation at bay. And who's allowing it to happen? We are. Because if we're not holding our senators and representatives accountable to protect the electric grid, then they're just going to continue to take the money. That's what's going on. And who's paying for all of this? Me and you. So I've got to hand it to the electric utility lobby. Very well played. Very well played. You're taking our money and you're using it to lobby against our interests. You're using it to lobby against legislation that would protect the grid. So I hope this is annoying some of you. And in the last 10 years, the electric utility industry has spent 1.2 billion with a B, lobbying Congress, largely to keep regulation at bay. So, a lot of people will ask me, well, why don't they do something about it? Why don't they protect the electric grid? Well, that's 1.2 billion reasons why Congress has yet to do it. Since this all kind of goes on behind, closed doors up in Congress, I mean, this is publicly available information. I pulled this out of the Center for Responsive Politics, which tracks the lobbying money. They track the money. And so I just pull out the part for the electric grid, because obviously that's the issue I'm interested in. But if you're interested in other issues, you can, see who's paying who for what. But, this is where us, we as citizens, we as patriots, we as Americans have got to hold our elected officials accountable for this. If you want to take the money, you better protect the grid, or you better refuse the money, or you better do something, because November 9th rolls around and I'm in the voting booth. If you didn't protect my family, you're not getting my vote. And that's just basically the way I roll. And as I said, I've had instances both on the state and the federal level where a representative actually did listen to me and actually did take action. Those people earn my vote. The ones that blow me off or don't, don't protect my family and protect my country, they don't get my vote, So, but there's, all kinds of information you can find here. Do we get any questions in the chat yet, Greg, or did I just put everybody to sleep here?
Oh, there's a lot of discussion in the chat. I've been kind of going in and out of. I had to open my laptop to catch up with it since I'm displaying Google here in our chat room here.
Yep.
Or in our share room. So I've had to pull out my laptop to keep up with it. People are just talking in general, a lot of comments, and I've tried to reply to them in here. If anybody has a specific question you'd like to ask Command Sergeant Major Mike Mabee, now would be a good time. But we're going to have to wrap it up here in a minute, because I've got another meeting in 30 minutes, and I still got some preps to do to get this video properly posted. So,
do you want me to talk really quick about Texas, Greg? As long as
go for it. Go for it. Yeah,
okay. Because
Mike moved from the Northeast down to Texas. By the way,
sure did. I got blamed for this one. So my family moved from New Hampshire to Texas last year, just in time for the February Texas blackout this year. Now, the blackout in Texas and being down here on the ground, I observed the effects of this. So number one, 210 people died, most of them as a result of the loss of the Texas electric grid. So the vast majority of the 210 people who died of hypothermia, carbon monoxide poisoning, failure of their electric medical equipment, exacerbation of existing conditions because of the cold weather and the loss of their heat. But we also saw the critical infrastructures in Texas impacted. So we saw for days the grocery store shelves empty. You couldn't find water, you couldn't find eggs, you couldn't find milk, you couldn't find bread in the grocery stores. The transportation infrastructure in Texas, the gas stations had no gas. Even if when the power came back on, they weren't getting their deliveries because the transportation infrastructure was impacted. The water and wastewater systems were impacted. Millions of Texans were under boil water orders, and some didn't have water for a long period of time because of the impacts on those. A matter of fact, there were instances where the fire departments had to sit there and watch buildings burn down because they didn't have the the water to fight the fires. So we saw the impact on all these critical infrastructures in that blackout. So that's a cautionary tale for the rest of the United States. So we saw that weather coming a week ahead of time. We saw this cold snap coming, and yet as soon as the cold weather arrived, the Texas grid just capitulated and collapsed. So, well, that was extremely bad weather, and nobody could. Well, no, this happened in 1989 in Texas. This happened in 2011 in Texas, and then it happened again in 2021 in Texas for the exact same reasons. Extreme cold weather, Texas grid capitulates. So after every one of those grid collapses, there were hearings, there were political leaders, saying, we're going to investigate this. At the end of the day, nothing ended up happening in the first two. And in the second one, there was all kinds of legislation. There was something like 26 bills introduced in the Texas legislature, and only a couple of them ended up passing. One of the ones that didn't pass was one of the bills that I thought was really, really good that was introduced by Senator Bob Hall, which was an all hazards grid protection bill, would protect against EMP, cyber, weather, everything. So at the end of the day, once the Texas legislature got done, here's what we're doing in Texas. Number one, nobody is going to be held accountable for the 210 deaths. Nobody. And guess what? We are going to help reimburse the electric utilities whose negligence caused that blackout for their financial losses. Well played, electric utility lobbyists. Well played.
Wow, what a travesty. What a travesty. And see, here's the thing. Like you said, this happened before. That we knew was coming. They could have done things, and they just didn't do it. It just sounds like all the problems we're having when we're trying to get our grid hardened today. We're out here trying to tell people this. We're trying to get the powers to be to do their job, to do what they're supposed to do, and all they do is drag feet. And we see it in real life examples, and we see this in other emergencies that break out where communities are not as well prepped. I will say that at least the levees appear to be holding in New Orleans this time. So
yeah,
we got something right for a change. But I worried about that because I didn't know what kind of independent assessments they had to make sure that these things are only as good as the weakest link in the chain, and you got to have one breach point for the water to flood in.
And unfortunately, it took Hurricane Katrina for them to fix the levees.
Right,
and we had to lose almost 2,000 people in Hurricane Katrina in order for action to be taken. And that's
right, 2,000 people and $125 billion. And the year before, there was an article in National Geographic explaining exactly what would happen. They knew all about it. What did they do? Nothing. They could have prevented all that damage in front of Hurricane Katrina if they would have done it. But the problem is, if you get a national grid down, there's no do-over. There's no come back and we'll fix it next time. It's over. And so we don't have that knee-jerk response advantage for a catastrophe like that. That's why we're trying to draw attention to it. And it's just, it's so hard to do with our lunkhead industry and our politicians. But if we raise enough cane about it, I'm sure we can do it. That's what Command Sergeant Major Michael Mabee and I and others are trying to do. We're trying to draw this attention. But this is why we need people like you. We need you to get involved and make these phone calls, because then it says, oh, the public cares about this. I better do something. I want to keep my stinking job sitting up here in this corrupt seat in Congress. If I want to keep this stinking job, I better do something, because my constituents are making noise about this. The natives are getting restless. So we need the natives to get restless.
That's exactly what we need. So, if you're watching this, please take these actions on our Take Action page, and also tell your friends, tell your family. For those of you who have a little bit of time to devote to activism, make this an issue for a while, but at least do the minimum. At least contact your 3 federal people that are in there representing you, your 2 senators and your U.S. representative, for your district, and ask them that question. Send them a copy of the report, about the Chinese transformers and ask them, why are we doing this? This makes no sense. They're hacking us and we're using their equipment in the very grid that they're hacking, you know?
Right, right. So I'm responding to somebody here telling me go to your website and go to the take action button. So that's what you do. There we go. Add in, there's a comment. So again, this is Mike's website here. And if you, it's michaelmabee.info. I'm sorry, I'm gonna put that in here. I got that right. All right. And what you do is you come in here and just hit the take action button again. It takes you straight down for those that are just joining. I've used that graphic for a thumbnail for some of my interviews with you.
Yep.
Past. And you just scroll down and it tells you what to do right here. This is, if you do this, this will cover everything we're mainly what we're talking about in this video.
Right.
And if you want to take further action, this goes more into it here, guys. You can contact what you can do, because we also need a grid hardened. But this is just to prevent the back doors and the cell phone equipment giving contact and control over to our power grid to a country who is somewhat adversarial to us right now, which we seem to be giving everything to.
Yep, a country that is probably, I mean, we can argue China versus Russia. I am more and more coming of the opinion that China is, our biggest adversary, right now.
That's where I'm at. That is definitely where I'm at. All right, so are we done with the share here?
I think we are.
All right. So we're setting the speaker view. Very good. So hello everyone, here we are. And once again, I want to point out Mike Mabee wrote a great book here. This is a civil defense book. This is prepping on a community level. And believe me, really and truly, if you want to survive, you need a lot of people with you. It's on the same page. If your community is secure, your security is going to be a whole lot better than just if you prep and everybody knows you're the sole guy on the block with food. That may not be a good thing, but if the whole community is better prepped, then that is a good thing. So that's community level prepping. It's called civil defense, and he calls it the Civil Defense Book. And this is available on your website, right, Mike?
Yep. There's a link right on the website that you can get to it. It's up on Amazon. You can get it as a Kindle, which I think is like $1.99. Just download it on your Kindle. So.
And I really appreciate Mike. He's come and spoke at my Power Grid Defense Conference that I've done here, one of them, the last one.
Yes,
and
that was a blast.
We got to spend a lot of time talking, Mike and I did, after the day's programming. And, I consider Mike to be a good friend now, and we have stayed in touch with each other. And this is the third time I brought him on the channel here, guys, because this is one of the things I do when I'm not doing YouTubing and working my day job and working the garden and worm farm and aquaponics and microgreens is, okay, guys, I don't get any sleep, but I'm quite involved in this power grid defense community, as you can see. It's very important to me because this is important for our whole world. This is important for our civilization, and I've done a number of videos on this, and I've told you I'm going to be second to none on any of your prepper channels that are bringing you stories about power grid defense, because I'm in the community and I've got great compadres like Command Sergeant Michael Mabee here. He is second to none. I mean, he's really up there because he is really pulling the yoke on this to make sure that we're secure. He's very active. He spends a lot of his time and money, and he does this on his own, guys. He's got another day job just like me.
That's right.
Maybe he has to work for a living just like I do, and so he does all this on the side. This is a passion of love for the world and our country. He's a real patriot, and I am honored, greatly honored to know him and for what he's doing here.
Well, the honor is mine for being on your show, Greg, and being able to talk to all of your great patriotic viewers. And let's do something. Let's not stand by and take it. That's
it. So that's it. Let's just stand up and and fight for what we know that we can save here. And we know we can save this. I get all these people throwing dispersions at, well, I'm okay. I don't need to worry about it. Guys, when the whole economy goes down, you might discover that your isolation isn't as good as you think, because you need that community. We need to keep this country together. So another thing, everybody, a lot of people accuse me of being a fear-based channel. Oh, you're just promoting fear. We're talking solutions here. This is solution porn, not fear porn. This is what I call hope porn.
Yep.
There's fear porn. Well, this is hope porn, because the hope is we can fix this, but we need you.
That's right.
Smokey Bear says only you can prevent forest fires. Well, only you can help us get this grid security. It takes people. It's going to take people calling the Congress, calling the Public Services Commission, the utility commissions in the various states in order to start turning this around. But we can do that, and we're bringing you the tools for how to do that. So we're talking solution space here, fix it space, not yikes, the sky's falling and run for duck for cover space. So it's like, if say the sky's falling, I'm gonna say, where's a pole I can stick up there and hold it up? Of course, I don't believe this, and there's people that actually literally believe the sky can fall, I believe.
Yeah.
Flat earthers. I don't subscribe to that. But this is, figuratively speaking. Now there's a lot of them, Mike. Some of them are my subscribers. But God bless them, guys, we're here to make it a better world. We can fix it. We can do this, but we need your help, because we got to wake up the crusty old corrupt system and get it moving and do it and get the people doing the job they're supposed to do.
Absolutely.
All right, Mike, I got just a little time to try to get this thing properly formatted for being on the platform, and I got another meeting here in 18 minutes.
Yeah,
Actually,
it was a pleasure, Greg. Thank you so much for having me.
It is always a pleasure to have you on, because, like I said, you're one of my heroes. I mean, who's heroes? People like to think of a Superman, a Spider-Man. Hey, the heroes are people that are giving their time and effort, their own blood, sweat, and tears, their own money, making a difference. And you can be a hero too. All you got to do is make a phone call. You can be a hero. Just make a phone call. And you can help make this world a better place. That's all we're asking. Just do something, guys. Help make this world a better world. We can do it. You can do it. We can all do it together. And on my channel, I tell everybody we're family. Well, family, let's stick together and try to make this a better world. So that's where we're going. That's what we're about. So, Mike, once again, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for everything you do. And I want to thank all the everyone for listening. Please share this video, because this video has solutions. This video has answers. It kind of gets me that, I put out a video like this and it might get 1,000, if we're lucky, 2,000 views on it. And I'll see somebody else sitting back, well, I think the higher grade might go down. And they'll say, well, it won't go down. Hey, if the sun gets us, it's only going to happen on the side of the earth that's got daylight. Wrong. They'll say something like that, and they'll get 40,000 views for a video like that. It's not really. The information is wrong and not very informative, and they get tons of views. And we're out here putting out real information and what you can do about it, trying to get us fixed. And we get just sometimes a trickle of views compared to what some of these other channels get. Some of them are smaller than my channel, by the way, guys. So let's share this. I think I'm being shadow banned because I'm putting out too much truth here. And one of the guys said truth porn in the previous comment. I think that's a problem. So you guys can help us out with that too. Share this video. Let's make it go viral. Share it as much as you can so we can get this word out for what can be done. We can fix it. We can make this world better. So let's do it. It's worth it. Hey, there's nothing lost in trying, guys. But if you don't try and it all goes down, then you may say, well, why didn't I? Why didn't I? Yep. The least we can do is try. A phone call isn't such. You just watch this video we've been going for better than an hour. So you surely can use 5-10 minutes to make a few phone calls. All right, guys, let's do it. Let's stick together. Let's make it a better world. Let's fix it. Hope porn. Let's spread the hope, spread the love. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you all you mods. I know you've been really busy today moderating the room. A lot of stuff's been popping up. So I appreciate you for that and everyone else. So Mike, we're going to end the show here.
All right.
But I'm going to say thank you, guys. And we'll catch you again, Mike. I hope to get you on the channel again before too long.
Absolutely.
You're an excellent guest and a good friend. It's just good chatting with you in general.
Yeah,
And
great.
look at all the books he's got, guys. He's well read. All right, guys. Everybody says I have a lot of hats. Look at his. They're all combat hats, and he's worn them too.